Oregon is making history once again. It will no longer require people to live in the state in order to seek aid in dying. In 1997, Oregon was the first state to allow terminally ill adults to attain doctor-assisted aid in dying, and it's now the first state in the U.S. to drop the residency requirement. This comes after a settlement in the U.S. District Court where the Oregon Health Authority and Oregon Medical Board made an agreement. Doctors still have to make sure the patient is mentally capable of making this decision, and then they can prescribe lethal medication.
Death is not easy to talk about. It's something we're all going to do, and any opportunity to, in a more thoughtful way, approach the issues that surround end-of-life care will make people's experience of the end of life better.
Well, before this was lifted, one family says the residency requirement was a barrier for those suffering with terminal illnesses. Fox 12's Drew Marine spoke with a man whose wife made this decision 8 years ago to end her life. Drew, how does he feel about this announcement?
He says this is a smart move. Dan Diaz's wife, Brittany Menard, chose when she would die after being diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor in 2014. But because they're from California, they had to live in Oregon before they could go through with this decision. So he knows all too well how this decision will help families. Brittany Menard was enjoying a vacation in wine country with her husband, Dan Diaz, when she was dealing with piercing headaches that led to a terminal diagnosis at 29 years old.
The brain tumor was very large. 10 days later, she had brain surgery at UCSF Medical Center. They were able to remove only about 35% of that tumor. Doctors
initially gave her 3 to 5 years to live, and that prognosis quickly changed.
Unfortunately, at the first follow-up MRI, the tumor showed signs that it was growing aggressively, indicative of a glioblastoma multiforme, so the most aggressive type of brain cancer. And they then told Brittany that 6 months was all the time she had left.
She knew Oregon had passed the Death with Dignity Act, which allowed adults with terminal illnesses that had 6 months or less to live to have the option of medical aid in dying, which is heavily regulated.
Brittany was a very loving, very caring person, but she was at the same time a very determined individual. And I say that with a smile because, it's her own little force of nature. So she was not going to just roll the dice and let cancer be in the driver's seat and let cancer dictate how her final few days on this green earth might play out.
Doctors have to make sure the patient is mentally capable of making this decision, and the patient has to give written and verbal requests before they can prescribe the lethal medication, which the patient can then take when they choose. But back in 2014, you had to live here in Oregon to get that assistance. So Dan and Brittany packed up their life in California to move to Portland.
We, said goodbye to our friends and families. She had to find a new medical team. She had to establish residency, which meant, getting a driver's license, changing her voter registration. And at that point, we moved to Portland, Oregon. She continued receiving care at OHSU. And her goal was to live as long as possible.
But after a settlement in the U.S. District Court in Portland Monday, the Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Medical Board agreed to stop requiring residency, something Dan Diaz says has been a barrier for people seeking this option.
They don't have to get that driver's license, so they don't have to go to the DMV. They don't have to change their voter registration. So that is, and when you're at end of life, that's significant.
Dan says he made a promise to Brittany that he would help pass more aid in dying legislation in other states across the U.S. And right now he's working on that in Delaware, New York, and Massachusetts, something he hopes honors Brittany's life and legacy. Live in studio, Drew Marine, Fox 12 Oregon.